We're joined now at the library desk by Jeffrey Thielman. He's CEO and president of the International Institute of New England, one of the largest regional nonprofits working to protect immigrant rights and resettle refugees. Jeff, it's good to see you again.
Good
Thanks
to see you
for being
again,
here.
too. Thank you.
So, Jeff, President Trump released a flurry of executive actions yesterday, a lot of them involving immigration, declaring a national emergency at the border, designating criminal cartels as terrorists, suspending refugee resettlement, and on and on and on. What does this mean for what you're doing here with refugees in Massachusetts?
Well, I mean, the executive orders that President Trump announced yesterday are going to scare a lot of people. They're going to cause a lot of confusion among folks. We're very concerned about his order limiting refugee admissions. If you read the order carefully, he's suspending it effective January 27th, and then there's 90 days or so where the Secretaries of Health, of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of State are supposed to gather information and do a report for him. We see that as a window for some advocacy to continue the program, because in that particular program, we're talking about Afghan allies who defended the United States, work with our troops overseas who are not able to come because of that executive order. I was on a call yesterday with Afghan veterans who are upset about this and are lobbying the president and his team and have some contacts there. So there's some hope that we can reverse some of these things. I mean, what the American people, I think, voted for and want is a legal immigration system that is fair and well managed. And what Donald Trump did yesterday is just create more chaos. That's what he did. And I don't think that's what the American people want. I also think what he did, or what he hopes, is that his actions are popular, and over time, the American people aren't going to like chaos and disruption in their immigration system.
I hope you're right. By the way, didn't he lower refugee numbers when he picked a number last time in Trump 1.0?
Right, last time. So the President of the United States has the power under the law to set the refugee admission target every October 1. Biden set it at 125,000. Last time, Trump came in and lowered it right away. This time, he didn't do that. He just kind of set up this rule that says we're going to look at it in 90 days, but it's suspended on January 27th.
So your optimism, or if I can call it that, or your hopefulness, it seems to me is belied by recent history. The guy who's the border czar, this guy Tom Homan, I think his goal was to be as rude and condescending and threatening as he could possibly be. When Mayor Wu talked about, on our show actually, about non-cooperation, he immediately went after Wu specifically. When he was asked the question a couple of weeks ago, what happens when two parents are undocumented but their children is a citizen, what's supposed to happen? And his response was, take the kid with you when you're deported. I mean, this is not exactly an administration that is solely worried about undocumented people who've committed horrible crimes.
Right.
Being undocumented in and of itself, no matter what your status within that, you're the enemy of the United States.
That's
people.
Right. That is clearly the policy of the new administration. If millions of Americans, or millions of people, are deported from the United States of America, millions of immigrants are gone from the United States of America, they're going to take the economy with them. Because all the folks that you mentioned and that we're concerned about are working in hundreds of thousands of businesses across the United States. Here in Massachusetts, both documented and undocumented immigrants are key to our economy. In Massachusetts, 32,000 kids, at least something like that, live with at least one parent who is undocumented. So if all of these deportations happen, which cost a lot of money and take a lot of time and a lot of manpower, if they happen, those kids are going to be without one or more parents. And they're in school systems. They're going to require more money from our state because we're going to have to care for those kids. They're going to require more human services providers. So it's a bad situation.
Well, by the way, I deeply admire what you do. So this is not about you. This is just my concern about this. Let's assume they don't go as far as the worst fears are. It seems to me just having this hanging over the heads of so many people you deal with. I mentioned on the air yesterday this incredible piece written in the New York Times. You probably saw it by a doctor. Her name is Danielle Offrey in the New York Times over the weekend, the title of which is Doctors and Nurses Should Get Ready for Mass Deportation. This is a woman who was a patient of a friend of hers who was a doctor, and she has rotator cuff tendonitis. And she contacted the doctor saying, quote, this is in the New York Times, is there any possibility you can write a letter stating that if they handcuff me, can they please handcuff me with my hands in front of me because she can't move her hands? If nothing ever happens to this woman, other than the fear of something happening, she's got to live under this unbelievable cloud for years and years and years.
That's exactly right. And so our case specialists, we're an organization last year that served 20,000 immigrants and refugees in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and some in other parts of New England. And our case managers are getting calls every day from people worried about that. We've done some Know Your Rights training so people are aware of what their rights are under our laws in the United States, but that doesn't matter, they're fearful. And the fear has a lot of ramifications for our communities, because if they're fearful, they're not going to be cooperating with police.
They're not going to the doctor.
They're not going to the doctor. They're not going to the dentist. They're not getting the care they need. So it is not a good situation. And really what's going to happen may not be success in deporting people, but there will be success in creating fear among communities. You're right, Jim.
I know you're not a politician, but let's nonetheless talk about the politics of this a little bit. I mean, you can understand where people, and surprisingly, as you know from the vote, a lot of recent arrivals who are Latinos coming from Mexico or coming from Central America, they voted for Trump too, so they weren't really that concerned about the people that were coming after them. But if it's a town, say like right in Roxbury here, they had to shut down, Milward Healy to shut down a recreation center in Roxbury that was serving the kids in Boston, not wealthy kids in Boston, to house refugees. So you see people saying that, wow, my kid can't go to the recreation center. These people just showed up from wherever they showed up, and I'm getting forced out. Or in like Springfield, Ohio, the place where you have the notorious "they're eating the dogs and cats" claim by Trump, which of course wasn't true. But the amount of money it costs a town to absorb the extra students, to absorb the extra housing. People can't afford housing. They say, I can't afford my housing, and look at this. So maybe there needs to be some more political outreach or something from if you're going to have all these people coming in here, it's got to be, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, let me make a couple of points of that. Right after college, I lived in Peru for 3.5 years as a volunteer with the Jesuits. And so I speak Spanish, and I am actually not surprised that many populations, Latino populations, were attracted to Donald Trump. That didn't surprise me. The folks that I worked with in Latin America many, many years ago, and Latinos that I know here in our state, there's a tendency there to be attracted to parties and policies that are, faith-centered and kind of more culturally conservative. Okay, so I wasn't surprised by that tendency, and I haven't been surprised by the trend of Latino voters in particular voting for Republicans.
Hold on for 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't think the Jesuits are in favor of what Trump is doing
No,
with
they're not.
the refugees. And a lot of Catholics, including myself, were disgusted that Cardinal Dolan was there at the
I was
inaugural
disgusted
yesterday.
too, Marjorie, as a Catholic. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that. Yeah, no,
Having
exactly.
said that, the Pope said it was disgraceful, the mass deportation plan, for whatever that's worth.
So,
Go ahead.
right, no, we're getting. I'm sorry to take you off topic, but the Jesuits, no, they're not wild about that.
Yeah.
But so the second point I want to make is, yes, communities in Massachusetts have been concerned about people coming into the state. What's happened is that people came in lawfully who were admitted to the United States for humanitarian reasons, who are now, by the way, our organization is rehousing people. We're teaching people English. We're providing legal services to people in the shelters, and those folks are getting jobs, and they're getting into our communities, and they're integrating, and they're becoming successful here. Many, many stories of good stories. The issue has been that those folks came here to Massachusetts without proper funding. That's the issue.
Exactly.
That's the
Why
issue.
can't? That's what I'm wondering. If this is going to happen, there should be some federal funding. It seems to me to ease the transition, so a school system like in Lawrence suddenly doesn't have to deal with 15 extra kids in the first grade.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
a joke? Wait, was that a joke?
No.
The federal government is going to provide funding for local
Well,
schools
somebody-
because of the additional burden
I
of
think there'd be
undocumented
what
families'
I'm
kids?
talking about less hostility toward new arrivals if the situation wasn't I'm getting screwed.
But Trump wants more hostility to new
I
arrivals.
know, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about a way to cut down on the hostility about immigrants coming to this
So
state.
I would say, first of all, the folks that came to Massachusetts as migrants were lawfully admitted to the United States of
Right.
America as humanitarian parolees. They have a right to be here.
Explain what a humanitarian
Humanitarian
parole is.
parolee is someone admitted for humanitarian reasons because they're fleeing persecution. They've kind of given good case at the border, or they were admitted through the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan parole program, which Trump ended yesterday. He ended CPP 1, this application, Customs Border Protection application 1, and he ended this parole program. And so folks were coming in, which was a good thing. The downside is they didn't have enough funding for cities, towns, and states and organizations like ours.
By the way, explain the difference between humanitarian parole and temporary protected status.
Temporary protected status is a more permanent, it means you're in this group of people that cannot go back to your homeland because the United States of America has determined that it's too dangerous.
But it's only for 18 months. Is that what it is?
They've renewed it, so it keeps getting renewed. And actually, in the last Trump administration, he did renew temporary protected status. I'm not sure he will this time. So for people that had it.
So let's talk about Massachusetts
Yep.
for a second. One of the biggest issues confronting the governor of Massachusetts is our emergency shelters. And she makes the point every time she's here, it's not just for migrants, it's also for homeless people who've been here. We have the only state with a right to shelter law, which she has gone to court and been allowed to, I don't know if she'd like the word violate, but I think that's fair, not comply with, violate. She's now proposing a 3-month residency requirement in these emergency shelters. What does that mean in real terms, should the legislature buy into this?
I hope the legislature doesn't buy into it, and we've lobbied several legislators to say that's not a good idea. I don't know what it actually means on the ground, because it's very hard to prove residency. People jump back and forth between New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, and so that's a really hard thing to provide for. I think it is anti-immigrant. We're concerned about that messaging. We don't like that at all. The fact of the matter is that the emergency shelter system needs to be improved upon, and it has been improved upon in recent months. When we first got involved in the shelter system about a year and a half ago, there were about 100 families a month being exited from the shelter system. At the end of December, it was over 500 families a month. So the system is actually getting better, and the governor's staff reaches out to people like me and our organization for ideas all the time.
Well, they're expediting work permits is one thing, right?
Well, that
Which
was
is
a great
really
thing.
good thing.
That was
yeah.
a good thing the governor did and
Yeah.
her staff did. They expedited work permits when people first got here. They want people out of the shelters faster, and we're in favor of that, and we're working hard to make that happen.
We're talking to Jeffrey Thielman.
You know, doing the work you do, you must hear stories all the time about why people came here. And I always think that if you are desperate enough to do what some of these families have done, you know, crossing the desert and carrying their children, and it's going to be pretty bad.
It is pretty bad. You know, last summer I was I was part of a delegation that went to the southern border. We were in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and Chihuahua, Mexico, and then we were in El Paso, Texas. And we met with government officials on both sides of the border, academics on both sides of the border, and volunteers and church groups and others that were housing and helping people. And I asked a bunch of migrant families that were coming to the border and that were filling out the Customs Border and Protection application why you were coming. And they were all leaving terrible situations. And I asked these volunteers, these two women that were working in Mexico, I asked them what they see. And they say, look, anybody who gets this far, who goes through the Darien Pass, who has come from different countries in Central America, who has paid smugglers, paid cartels to get to the border, deserves to come into the United States because they're hungry for a better life, and they'll go up north and they'll work hard and add value, and that has happened time and time again in our history.
You know, Jeffrey Thielman, a term we have adopted here and used probably, well, I was going to say too much, we haven't at all, is the term created by Tim Snyder from Yale, anticipatory obedience.
Yeah.
And the most egregious examples are obviously the Zuckerbergs and the Bezoses and all those people.
And the banks.
And the, well, we're going to, and the banks. But it seems to me it's not just Trump's Tom Homans of the world we have to worry about. Locally, Tatte, the coffee shop food thing, basically forced 60 of their people to resign because they got a notice from Social Security there weren't the appropriate documents. If you don't come up with the appropriate documents, this will be a problem. From my understanding, and you know far better than I, getting that notice is not at all equivalent to there being a serious problem. It happens all the time. Was this a case of anticipatory obedience, or at least acting too soon against workers who your business is dependent upon?
I think it might have been. I don't know the specific
I don't know all the
circumstances. Yeah,
specifics
so and
either.
I don't know, and I'm sure the management at Tatte consulted an employment lawyer, an immigration lawyer before they made that decision. We would do the same thing. You know, if people
You would consult a lawyer,
You would
not the same thing forcing your staff to resign.
No, I would consult
Okay,
a lawyer.
fine,
Yeah,
of
you would
course,
consult
yeah,
a lawyer
of
and
course.
ask them, you know, we
Okay,
have a client in this
Yeah, yeah.
situation, we have an employee
Yeah.
in this situation, what do we do? I mean, if someone is if you verify that someone is not documented, documented and legally eligible to work in the United States, it's a difficult situation for an employer to find themselves in.
Huge percentage of the people who work in restaurants in this city are in the exact same spot. They're not being forced to resign.
It's better not to ask.
Well, maybe that's. Well, in a minute, we're going to ask you the last 2 minutes to give us some good news if you have some, and let us know specifically more what your organization is doing. But you mentioned employers who are dependent. Farm industry says all the time when they're interviewed, we're not going to have food if all these people are. But they're not doing anything.
No, they're not doing. No, they need to be more. They need to advocate more. All those industries. I mean, in Massachusetts, we had 90,000 immigrants come into our state last year. That gave us a positive population growth for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I know.
We served about 18,000 of those people. Most of those people are not in the shelter system. They're working in our economy and they're adding value. And people need to remember that. Our entire growth in this region has depended on immigration. The biotech industry is all headed by people from outside of the United States. Our high-tech industry, the people working in hospitals, taking care of us at the end of our lives are all foreign-born, and many are foreign-born. Our organization has been around for 100 years. We have been here before. We were founded in 1924 when a terrible immigration act was passed that limited immigration to 2% of all nationalities in this country. I was CEO the last time Trump came on. We've been prepared for this. We're trying to raise more money. We're celebrating our 100th this year, so we're celebrating.
Anniversary.
Thank you, Jim. So we're celebrating immigrants and refugees and reminding the broader community of how important they are for our society.
What's the website if people want to help?
IINE.org. Thank you.
IINE.org.
Thank you.
You mentioned at the beginning about Afghan refugees, and I remember we talked about this a lot, where interpreters, people who had risked their lives for the American troops, were
Seth Moulton's interpreter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And veterans were very upset that they might get sent back. So just tell us.
Well, I was on a call
with
last night with Evacuate Our Allies, which is a group of former Afghan and Iraq veterans. And they are very concerned about the executive order Trump issued stopping refugee resettlement because it means that people that interpreted for them and work for them overseas in Afghanistan or Iraq, mostly Afghanistan was the call last night, are not going to be able to come to the United States. And that is morally wrong. And I think the majority of the American people would want people who work with our troops to be able to come here and live in safety.
Also, why are they going to work with our troops next time if a commitment that's made to them is dishonored by our government?
Right,
They'll
they're not going to
probably
trust
be
us.
killed if they are found
Or their
out.
families or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, and stopping resettlement sends a bad message to the world that we're no longer a humanitarian nation. And I actually believe we are. And not only are we a humanitarian nation, we're a nation that depends on immigrants and refugees to grow and prosper.
You only have a minute. How do you deal with it? You were through first round of Trump. You're about to go, I assume, through the second round of Trump. How do you deal with this as a person?
I mean, as a person, I was. Thank you for asking. I've been, preparing mentally for all of this, like, analyzing the orders, reading Project 2025, preparing last night at home, kind of going through all my notes to get ready for all these conversations. But it still hurts. It still hurts. It still wounds me that there are so many Americans that are anti-immigrant. I hear people on the radio saying, for example, that, we just want the undocumented folks out. That's 11 million people. There goes the economy. We just want the people out who don't look like us. That's what they're saying.
Also, those people who are saying that, if their families were at risk or they had no ability to get work, would they not do the exact same thing to protect their partner, their kids?
Yeah, exactly.
In any case, Jeff, you're doing great work.
Great.
Keep doing it. IINE.org.
Thank you, Jim.